Mr. Luanne and his colleagues, you may resume your examination, Mr. DeGarrett.
Would you lie under oath to help your case?
Yes.
Okay. Have you lied thus far during your testimony at this trial?
No.
But if you had lied, given your last answer, you might not admit it, correct?
Correct. Because what I'm saying is mostly the truth. There are certain things that I would lie about, certain very important things.
So maybe another way to say it, Mr. Durst, is would you agree that the question of did you kill Susan Berman is the most important question in this trial?
I would agree with that.
And you've also just agreed that you would lie about that.
Correct.
And you also just agreed that, in fact, if you had killed her, you wouldn't tell us, correct?
Correct.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay. How is everybody? Thanks for your patience. Sometimes real life catches up with me, and I just couldn't make it at 6 today. Sorry, guys. But I wanted to talk to you today about how the Jinx 2 answers the toughest question I get, or really the toughest question in true crime. And that question is, well, really, I think it's a fallacy. So I get asked all the time why women love true crime so much. Now, if my YouTube statistics are correct, at times I've had 70% men in my audience. Mostly it stayed at 50-50. I've never seen, or I've never had an audience predominantly of women. So I haven't seen that trend. I think it's really a fallacy. I think men are just as interested, a certain type of man or in a certain type of women are just as interested in true crime. But I think that there really are two different kinds of true crime interests, at least, okay? So there is the people who are interested in true crime because they're interested in the stories and they're interested in the darkest true crime stories, the serial killers. It's almost akin to a ghost story. They want to be scared. They want to go to the darkest areas that they can go to, get as scared as they can get. And also, sometimes they're just fascinating stories. And I would separate those true crime people from the trial watchers. And really, I would put myself in that area, who are very interested in the system. And there's something about when you watch a trial that you're being told a story, and you're being told a story in bits. And by the end, you don't just have a whodunit, that the answer to a whodunit, but you have an answer to a why they did it, and you have a really richer sense of the victim's life, the accused life, and the reason why something happened. So it's one of the few times that we can really make order out of chaos, and that we can make sometimes things as fair as we can make them if we have a just verdict, as fair as we can as human beings, not being God, a God, or God. I'm not suggesting there are multiple gods. God. So I think that this was never truer than in the Jinx, and why I think the Jinx 2 is so much more interesting than the Jinx Part 1, and so much better a documentary. So in the Jinx Part 1, the finale, we have Robert Durst in a hot mic moment admitting that he killed them all, of course. And what people forget about that, two odd things. Well, one very telling thing and one just very odd thing is he's in the bathroom. He doesn't realize he still has the mic on. And he says, "Oh, that's it. You're caught." That's very damning. And then he makes it very clear as to how he had a strategy to not understand to pretend to be confused when he got into a difficult question. I don't understand the question. So he's almost practicing. You hear him practicing. That's odd. Another odd thing that's picked up on in the microphone in the bathroom is it sounds like he's going to lift something. He's like, "I want this." I've always been just strangely fascinated by that. He's like, "Ooh, what is this? I want this." In his weird, creepy voice. But here's a guy, Robert Durst, whose only talent in life may have been getting away with murder. I mean, what a nothing burger of a man, and that's so often the case with these convicted killers. He's got all the advantages in society from school. I think what I just read was that the Durst family fortune is estimated at $1 billion. He could have done anything with his life, and he ends up a convicted killer, having killed. And I think what was really clear in the trial of Susan Berman, because it was a very interesting trial in that to prove that Robert Durst killed Susan Berman, it was because she helped him cover up the murder of Kathy Durst, and he wouldn't have murdered Morris Black. That also came into it. Had Morris Black not understood who he was or identified him and threatened to out him when he was on the run, when he was worried about getting arrested for the murder of his wife, Kathy McCormick Durst. So I think what the Jinx Part 2 does so well is gives even more information than what came out in the trial. So tonight is the season finale, and I assume that they're we ended last with the verdict, and I wasn't surprised at the news. I never heard, or I don't remember hearing, that the defense team never told Robert Durst that he was convicted. He was isolated because he was exposed to COVID, so he was isolated at the time, so he couldn't hear the verdict. I remember watching it live. I was hooked to this trial. It was a very long trial, and the way that the deputy DA who prosecuted John Lewin, who I've done 4 episodes with, and I have some news coming about that, hold on, is He has a unique style of cross-examination and direct examination. So what he told me is that most lawyers are trained to just care about the question, meaning you're communicating to the jury just in the questions you ask. Don't even listen. Basically, the answer doesn't matter. The questions are the most important thing. And John Luanne told me he found that very arrogant. And what he told me was that he likes to ask questions of which there are no good answers. So you saw in the opening, he asked, if you murdered Susan Berman, would you tell me under oath? No. So he's basically admitting to lying under oath. In his cross-examination of Robert Durst, he got Robert Durst to admit he had committed perjury 5 times, I believe, already in the trial. So it's over then. So credibility, he's very good at killing witnesses just on credibility alone by asking really smart questions, really strategic questions. And what I found with my interviews with John Luanne, and maybe it was a little disappointing because as I was watching this trial, I was like, this prosecutor is fantastic. I couldn't stop. And I'm listening to the court TV people and the law and crime people saying, oh, Durst is going to get away with it. Oh, this is going to be a replay of Galveston's, because you can't forget that he had the same team plus David Chesnoff, who's a celebrity defense lawyer. So he had this multi-million-dollar defense team, Dick Duguerin, Chip Lewis, and David Chesnoff, all formidable lawyers. And they had put he'd thrown all this money into his defense, and he had gotten acquitted in 2003 of the murder of his neighbor, Morris Black. So they thought he did so well up on the stand, we're going to put him up again. And it was a disaster. And it went on for 8 or 9 days. The judge had to put a stop to it. The judge said it was the longest cross-examination that he'd ever seen. He said to DA Luanne, you absolutely eviscerated, this is my words, not his, but I think he said you destroyed his credibility on day one. What are you doing? We have to put an end to this trial. It had gone on for so long. And the other really interesting part of that judge had a way of being really polite, but also very brutal in his honesty, when Chesnoff was arguing that basically that the prosecution was, so basically they disparaged Kathy Durst and called her an addict when she was really a very high achieving medical student on her way to becoming a doctor at the time that Robert Durst put an end to her life. And so that was the part of their defense, that somehow she was in rehab at the same hospital that she was planning to do her residency in. And the prosecution was bringing up how absurd that was. And here Chesnoff puts like this long soliloquy on the record that how dare the prosecution in this day and age suggest that a hospital wouldn't want someone in recovery, and we have all sorts of people in recovery. And the judge said, Mr. Chesnoff, you appear to be objecting to a fabrication, meaning like your defense is so ridiculous that it's absurd. Like, I'm not even going to entertain this objection, this sort of politically correct objection. There's so many memorable moments in that trial, but that trial is a perfect example of why I think we all love true crime. So we got such a feeling of who Susan Berman was, her whole world, who Robert Durst was, and not impressed, let me say, with his friends, some of the rudest witnesses you'll ever see in your life. So when people talk about the Karen Reed trial and how lying witness, I was like, you guys don't know what lying witnesses are. You haven't seen lying witnesses till you've seen the Durst trial. We're going to look at Susan Giordano's. It's actually a direct examination, but it comes off much more as a cross-examination. So of course, this is his best friend, Nick Chavin's co-worker or underworker. She was sort of like a Gal Friday at this advertising agency. And she asked Nick Chavin, meaning Robert Durst's best friend, to be introduced to Robert Durst or be introduced to some of his rich friends. So clearly she was out for his money. And she's one of the, if not the only woman besides his wife that he married just to get out, just to protect himself. And I think that's what we're going to learn about in the finale tonight, is why his wife had a criminal lawyer sitting in the trial. And so this woman, Susan Giordano, married with kids, and I think married 3 times, was having conversations with Robert Durst about getting a love nest. She sent him $150,000 in a suitcase that got intercepted when he was on the run. And she just got up on the witness stand and was one of the worst witnesses. So I thought we'd look at that together today. I'm going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to look at Susan Giordano, delicious direct examination. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. So I think that's going to be like the big reveal tonight. And his wife is so awful. So, we saw with Robert Durst flirting with his friend, his oldest friend, his wife, in jail on these sort of jailhouse video calls. I mean, they're together, but they're videoed, which I thought was so interesting. I'd never seen anything like that in a documentary before. And there's apps, but his wife won't come to the trial because she finds it depressing. And but her lawyer will, and he was a criminal lawyer. And I know that Kathy McCormick Durst's family is civilly suing Robert Durst's estate. And I know that the judge has said that she can't touch that $100 million until it's worked out. So pretty interesting. So let me get to Susan. This is Susan Giordano. Their plans was for Robert Durst to get acquitted and move into a love nest with Susan Giordano. And here he is in his jacket and his jailhouse wheelchair. That was also a point of discussion, that the jury should not see his property of whatever county jail on the back of his wheelchair, and it was covered. But so what I wanted to say is that when I first talked to this prosecutor, John Luanne, I eventually got the courage to write him And I think the email was sent like within an hour. I got a phone call from him. So I always put my phone number on the bottom. Like, oh yeah, hey, what do you want to talk about? I was so, I think it was the only time when I've been just so starstruck. I just could barely, I was just like, and he's like, yeah, I'll give you all the time I want when I'm walking my dog. I take these long hikes through the hills and I'll talk all you want. And so for the next couple of weeks, I would get these phone calls like, hey, you want to talk now? And then I'd have to set up all my equipment and send him a, like, I think it was like a Zoom link, and we'd start talking. And those interviews were some of the most fascinating interviews that I've ever done. And unfortunately, the audio, I could never get the audio really broadcast quality. But now, thanks to Murder by Maestro, these interviews can finally be heard. So that's what is upcoming. And I really hope, if you listen to one of my episodes in the next year, choose these episodes, because I think they're so fascinating and unusual and candid.
Now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes, thank you. Please be seated. For the record, please state and spell your first and last name.
Susan Giordano, Susan, middle initial T, last name Giordano, Giordano.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you, so that you can be heard, to speak directly into that microphone. You can tilt it up, you can pull it closer to you, and why don't you do those things? Yeah, you talk right into that microphone.
Okay, good, better? You can all hear me?
We'll see how it goes, but all right. Mr. Luanne, you may proceed.
And I'm going to try to keep my voice up. If any.
I mean, not for nothing, not to be a nitpicker, but why even wear the mask if you're going to wear it like that? I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm just not, I don't know. I don't know. I've become not a believer in the whole masks thing, having seen a really extensive study of how well it worked for everything. But I mean, even if best case scenario, why wear it like that? I mean, it's just like a fashion statement at that point. And P.S. at the end of this, she starts talking about how she can't stay for another day. This examination goes on so long because she flew all the way from New York, where she lives, to California without remembering her medication, and she's freaking out about it. But she returns the next day seeming perfectly fine. So I don't know. She's a bit of an actress. Let's put it that way.
Anybody, if my voice is down, if people can raise their hand, I can see you guys now because you're not behind me. So I'll glance over there to make sure I'm keeping my voice up. Ms. Giordano, if you don't hear me either, because I'm not used to the mask either, if you don't hear me, let me know and I will repeat myself, okay?
Yes.
Now, one other thing is that I know it's maybe a little uncomfortable. Pull that mask up high so it doesn't slip down. Otherwise, I'll have to keep reminding you. Like that, that's good. All right.
If you pinch the little nose thing on top, it'll.
Okay. I want to. Yeah. I want to be
together. There's a little wire thing.
Okay. Oh, you're right.
Yeah, good.
You are correct. Okay. Better.
May I begin, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ma'am, where do you currently reside? I don't mean your address, but the city and state are sufficient.
Campbell Hall, New York.
And how long have you lived in Campbell Hall, New York?
13 years.
And is it fair to say that you're from the East Coast?
Yes.
And when did you get to California? Meaning, when did you came to California yesterday? It's not a trick question.
No, okay. Yes, I flew in yesterday.
Okay. And what do you do for a living?
Art teacher,
And how long have you been doing that?
10 years.
Do you recognize, I'm going to point to this person right here, indicating the defendant. Can you tell me who that is?
Robert Durst.
And I want to ask you, and Mr. Durst, for the record, has just lifted his hand up and waved to the witness, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Ma'am, do you consider yourself, as you sit up there today, to be an unbiased witness?
Yes.
Do you agree that you have strong feelings towards Mr. Durst?
Yes.
Do you believe that in any way those strong feelings potentially prevent you from being as unbiased as you would like?
I am unbiased. Yes.
Yeah, she's totally unbiased. Having already broken the law for him, sent him $150,000 in cash in the bottom of a suitcase because he wanted his clothes, quote unquote. I don't know how she got out of being prosecuted for this, but I know I know we like to think that everybody gets prosecuted when they flagrantly break the law, but unfortunately that's not so. How she got out of that is something. But so right away, what Luanne likes to do is take a witness that's going to be a defense witness and take them as a state's witness, and that's what he did here. So he thought maybe Susan Giordano would be a character witness for Robert Durst, and he got to, he gutted them out on that possibility first. Very, very cleverly. And of course, she's very biased. Why would you even answer that? The honest way is to say, that's a perfect example. There is no good answer. So if you say, yes, I'm biased, which is the truth, at least you'll get points for honesty. I've been friends with Robert Durst, but then that guts you. And if you say you're not biased, it's a blatant lie. When you have a close friendship, so much so that you're willing to break the law, but she chose to go with the lie.
I'm totally unbiased.
Let me ask you,
my feelings are not.
You have several children, is that correct?
Yes.
I want you to assume for a moment, if one of your children were sitting in Mr. Durst's seat, would you still consider yourself to be unbiased? Grounds?
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
This is another really weakness of the defense is you need to object with a code, with a California evidence code. And that's something John Luanne knows front, backwards, and forwards for objection. So you'll hear like objection 352. And the reason I know 352 is that's the one objection the defense learned throughout the trial and would constantly just throw out 352 like just as a guess because he didn't have any lawyers from California. So Dick DeGarren's from Texas, which makes sense because he got him off in the Galveston, Texas trial. Chip Lewis, I assume, I'm not certain, but not from California. I would assume from Texas too, since he represented him in the Galveston case. And David Chesnoff is based in Las Vegas, Nevada. So there's no one there on his team who knows the evidence code. And they were constantly and very ineffectively objecting in this case.
Would you consider yourself to be unbiased even if one of your children were sitting
Yes.
there? So in essence, your position is that no matter who is on trial, it doesn't matter for you if you're sitting up there, you are a completely unbiased witness.
Yes.
How would you describe your current relationship with Robert Durst?
We were very dear friends. We don't speak very often now, but he's a very dear friend of mine.
And when you say friend, would that be the extent of what you would call the relationship?
It's platonic. Yes, is that?
And when you say platonic, can you define what you mean by that?
We don't have a relationship in that where other people have, like, we're best friends. I don't understand. Platonic is best friends with someone.
I mean, obviously, Mr. Durst is in custody, so you could not have a sexual relationship with him now because he's in custody, correct?
And I did not in the past.
So if I were to ask you, do you consider you and Mr. Durst to have
And you can't have a sexual relationship with Mr. Durst because he's 78 going on 178. I mean, and he really exaggerated his ill health for this. They tried to get him off on all sorts of medical episodes and reasons. That didn't work. Trial delayed, basically, due to, they tried that, didn't work. And he shaved his head to show the shunt for sympathy with the jury. And the other thing he did was he said he couldn't hear well enough, that he needed basically like an iPad to read while he gave his testimony so he could understand the lawyer's questions. And he seemed to not ever look at that iPad when it was his own lawyer, meaning on direct examination, but on cross, when it got to tough questions, you could even see it in the opening. He sat there pretending to read as he really strategized what would be his answer.
in any way a romantic relationship, what would be your answer?
We do not have a romantic relationship.
Have you ever had a romantic relationship?
No.
And have you always in the past said that your relationship with Mr. Durst was purely platonic?
Yes.
You've been asked this numerous times. Is that correct? The nature of the relationship? Oh, you need to answer out loud because the court reporter, you're nodding, but she can't.
Can you repeat that?
Sure.
Sorry.
You've been asked numerous times in the past
Mm-hmm.
that exact question, the nature of your relationship, and you've said that it's platonic. Is that right?
Yes.
You said it was platonic when you were interviewed on March 16, 2015, correct?
Correct.
You said it was platonic when you were interviewed on April 18, 2015, correct?
Correct.
You described it as platonic when you testified in court under oath on February 15, 2017. Is that correct?
Correct.
As you sit here right now, ma'am, I just want to give you one more opportunity. Is it still your position
Yes.
that, well, I need to finish my question. I think I know what the answer is going to be, but let me just finish if you can. So the court reporter, so what you're doing, and it's completely normal, but witnesses, when you understand where my question is going, you're kind of cutting me off and I can't finish. And the problem is the court reporter has to get it down. So if you can wait completely till I stop talking. Do you understand?
Yes.
So I just want to ask you, if I say right now, do you in any way want to change your assessment of the relationship as to being more than just friends or platonic?
No.
Do you love Bob Durst?
Absolutely.
Have you told him repeatedly that you love him?
Absolutely.
Do you tell him repeatedly in phone calls that you miss him?
Yes.
Do you talk about in the numerous phone calls you've had with him spending your rest of your lives together?
I have. Yes.
Do you talk about living together in the same house together?
Yes.
And is it your opinion, ma'am, that that is the definition of a platonic, just friendly relationship?
Yes.
Have you previously told Andrew Jarecki? You spoke to him 2 different times, is that correct?
Spoke to Andrew Jarecki a lot.
You were filmed speaking to him 2 different times, is that correct?
Yeah, Andrew Jarecki is the director of the Jinx And that's a whole nother conversation about capturing the Friedmans and what he did with that. He left out an entire other defendant in that case telling that story who also pled guilty, because that would somehow take out the mystery of did they do it, didn't they do it, even though both defendants in that case pled guilty. I would call that an innocence fraud documentary. But and then he financed, after he got out of this is pretty interesting actually. So he financed Jesse Friedman's exoneration, right? So that they got the Long Island DA to relook at that case. And so they had a whole bunch of people assembled to relook at the case, year after he got out of prison, to look at the case. And one of those people was Barry Scheck, who co-founded the Innocence Project. So, and he saw, and what came out was a damning report of his guilt. And Barry Scheck signed off. It's the only time I've ever seen anyone from the wrongful conviction movement ever say guilty, signed off on Jesse Friedman's guilt. That's how overwhelmingly guilty he was. So just a kind of an interesting backdrop, but he resisted testifying and never really did have to testify at this trial, interestingly. And that's a question I wish I had asked about. Still to this day, I didn't fully understand how he got out of it, if he was just cut for time. I know his lawyer really resisted, and I never understood what that resistance on his part was about.
Yes.
And you knew the cameras were going. It was filmed, correct?
Yes.
One of those was on March 10th, 2014, correct?
Oh.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the exact date, but yes, if you.
And the other one was literally the premiere, the night of episode 6, the finale, the day after Bob Durst had been arrested. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you recall telling Mr. Jarecki in 2014 that there was nobody who was closer to Bob Durst, including Bob Durst's wife, than you?
I never mentioned his wife.
Did you say?
I don't know.
Did you say specifically, ma'am, where you asked the following question? But it seems like there's nobody closer, from what I can tell. It seems like there's nobody closer than you. And you responded, no. Meaning you're the closest one to him, correct?
I would, as friend, we never brought up his wife. So I think I am very, very close. And I do feel that I was closer to him than most people.
Well,
he's closer to me than anyone else. He was my closest friend. He was the person I went to.
And you actually testified, ma'am, on February 15, 2017. You were asked these questions and you said that absolutely, although you love him, you would not refer to him as a boyfriend. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, the testimony that you testified to, that took place on February 15, 2017. And that was in front of Judge Wyndham, seated to your left, correct? To your right.
My right.
To your right. Thank you. And ma'am, at the time that you testified, I want you to listen to this question very carefully. Were you completely truthful in all of your answers?
Yes.
Now, during your prior testimony, ma'am, do you recall that you would be asked a question and then pretty repeatedly you would be confronted with audio clips of what you've said before? Is that correct?
Correct.
As you sit here today, are you thinking about whether or not when I ask a question that I'm going to pop a clip up there?
No, not really.
Absolutely, she is. He knows that he has all those recordings of her saying, "I miss you, I love you," or whatever Robert Durst, from her jailhouse calls, and she got busted before on it, and she's not going to do it again. And that's his style, is to impeach people with with the evidence that he has. And just note that this is not even a cross-examination. This is a direct examination, and how tough it is without being rude and unpleasant and slimy like Alan Jackson and Yvette, because he doesn't have to. He's got the evidence. He's done the work. I mean, just Alan Jackson's he's just so nasty to every single person that he comes across. The only time he isn't nasty, and David Unetti is slightly more civil, I would say, in the Karen Reed trial. And it's just unnecessary. It's unnecessary. And when you do that with every witness, I would think you would turn off the jury. So if this is not a corrupted jury or a stupid jury in the Karen Reed case, and the forensics come through, I don't see how she can't be convicted, but it's a fool's game. And when you have these, like I've said before, when you have these very powerful, very well-funded innocence campaigns going, you get wacky, very wacky verdicts.
You have an attorney here in court today who is an attorney from New York. Is that right?
Yes.
And that attorney has been basically representing you in this case since shortly after Mr. Durst was arrested in March of 2015, correct?
Yes.
Who's paying for that attorney?
Actually, that was supposed to come from money that Bob had gave me a long time ago. And he hasn't been paid as of yet. I didn't.
Ma'am, would the
pay him
answer be
everything.
that Bob Durst is paying for that attorney?
Well, it came from money but I still owe the lawyer money right now. I don't.
Ma'am,
So
is
I
it your understanding?
How does she think that makes her look better? How does she think that makes her look better? I still haven't paid him everything because he's on the clock right now. I think that's maybe what she means. How does that make her look better? Let me know in the comments. I don't get that.
That you will be paying the lawyer the money out of your pocket, or that Mr. Durst will be paying or reimbursing?
Honestly, my lawyer didn't even ask anything as of now, so I don't know. I don't know yet.
Ma'am, I'm not asking what your lawyer asked you. I'm saying, is it your understanding, as you sit here today, is it your belief that Mr. Durst is paying for your lawyer?
Yes.
And in fact, was your lawyer present? You and I have met before, is that right?
Yes.
I flew out to New York with investigators, and we interviewed you way back in April of 2015. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was your lawyer present for that interview?
Yes.
Now, I want to go way back, and I want you to tell us, how did you and Bob Durst originally meet?
Way back, I started working at an ad agency, and I did want to meet Mr. Durst, and there's a mutual friend that we had. And
Let me stop you. Who's the mutual friend?
Nick Chavez. Nick and I worked at the same agency. I didn't work for him at the time. So I knew Nick Chavez, and I wanted to meet Bob Durst. I was single, and I wanted to meet with him. Bob was very busy at the time. So it took me a very long time. When he was in Texas, I finally wrote to him, reminded him.
Wait, I want to stop you.
Yeah, Nick Chavez was, that's another thing that comes across. I don't know, it depends if you believe anything out of the defense attorney's mouth in the Jinx Part 2. But Nick Chavez was a super important witness in this trial. Very strong witness, very believable witness. And that's why, and Durst knew he would be. And that's why Durst's lawyer, Dick Duguerin, was trying to get to him and interview him. And he's like, I was just trying to find out what he wanted to say. And I'm sure he would have been very charming. But I'm sure Dick Duguerin, in his charming way, would have tried to convince Nick Chavez not to testify, found some way for him not to testify, way out of it, tried to. Had he gotten to him, instead Nick Chavez hid in his office stairwell so he didn't have to meet with Dick Duguerin. But he was devastated when they said, oh, because of his background. And I knew all about that and he died, by the way, Nick Chavez, last year. Just FYI, little extra information that if people were watching the Jinx Part 2 might not know. Because of that he was some kind of not believable witness. That was totally untrue. But his whole, you can see him online singing, playing the maracas and different instruments with Kinky Friedman. He, he actually, he wrote a song for Kinky Friedman that was what would you call it, an alt country hit. So unfortunately, because I don't even know if I can say the name of it, but if you're interested, well, I'll put it in the comments. But it's just kind of his whole role in convicting Durst was huge. And the story that he told about going out to dinner, this is a spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the Jinx Part 2, skip forward. And Robert Durst saying to him that he had to kill Susan Berman, which was Nick Chavez's other best friend. It was either her or me. And walking away was so chilling. And they brought in Elizabeth Loftus, this memory expert, and her testimony, and you can hear it is explained in my interviews with Luanne as to why it was totally ineffective, why Elizabeth Loftus is a favorite expert of the wrongful conviction movement. She's on the Innocence Project website last time I checked. She basically does all these studies, mostly that can't be repeated, that prove that you can't believe anything that you see or hear. that no one can remember anything accurately and eyewitnesses and memory gets corrupted so easily. And she was one of two witnesses for Ghislaine Maxwell, Bill Cosby. She testified, the Night Stalker. She consulted on O.J. Simpson's case. Over 600 cases. She's a hired gun for the defense. She even wrote a book called Witness for the Defense. And someday, probably when I need another break from a trial like the Karen Reed trial, we'll go through his amazing cross-examination of Elizabeth Loftus in this case, or you can check out my episode I did just on Elizabeth Loftus with John Lewin called Memory Expert Gets Wiped. It is incredible, but the whole entire cross-examination, he takes someone who's won awards and I believe presidential, some kind of really important medal honor. She has these really 47-page resume, really what we would consider impressive credentials, and reduces her to a pile of dust, really exposes her, I believe, in my opinion, for the fraud that she is. And that was really the thing that made me absolutely just really become a super fan of John Lewin when I saw that happen in real time in this trial. It was a cross-examination that went over days. And he had every quote. I knew every quote, and every quote handy, everything that she'd ever written. And he had already cross-examined her in 2012, so he knew where she was going to go. So back to Susan Giordano and her disastrous cross. There's just a little veering off the subject.
I was.
The time that you're describing, when was this approximately? What year? When you first met him?
First time I wanted to go out was 1987.
And how old were you back then?
I was 21.
And fair to say Mr. Durst would have been 44, is that right?
Yes.
And you had an interest in Mr. Durst, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you know that Mr. Durst was wealthy?
Not at 21, no. 21, no. I didn't really. I just knew he was a friend of Nick and he was a client. And that was it.
So you're working at...
Totally untrue from Nick Chavin's own mouth. I want to meet your wealthy friends. Introduce me to your wealthy friends. Always talking about getting with a rich guy. And out of, like I said before, she was the most successful because Robert Durst was notoriously tight with his money. Completely cheap. And she got money for her son's car. I think it was like over $350,000 she magically got from him over the years. Amazingly.
At this ad agency with Nick Chavez.
Yes.
And you agree that Nick and Bob were very close friends, correct?
Yes.
And you had an interest in dating Mr. Durst, but you had no idea at the time that Mr. Durst was from one of the wealthiest families in all of New York.
That's right.
When did you learn that he was as wealthy as he is?
When I wanted to go out with him, it was a few years later. I mean, I was in the art department, so I didn't do any financials, and there was a lot of clients. So that's it. I was the art person.
Did you know when you first met Bob Durst, did you know that his wife had disappeared?
Yes.
Did you tell Nick Chavez that you were interested in dating Bob?
I told Nick.
So for all those who followed my coverage of the Dan Markel case, doesn't this remind you of Charlie Adelson's girlfriend? Oh, he's almost perfect if he were a murderer. So he may be a murderer, but he's really wealthy. Hopefully he won't cause the end of my life. I mean, what are these women? I guess, and that's what the Jinx Part 2 also does, and what this trial did, is show all the enablers that these psychopaths get, these flying monkeys. The juror in Galveston, his wife became Durst's assistant, and they became friendly after he acquitted him, ridiculously and he tried a lot of the same techniques in storytelling in this trial. And I would love to watch that case and see what they did so convincingly. I've only seen clips. I don't know if the whole trial is available. Let me know if you know if it is.
In an elevator in 1987 that I wanted to meet with him. And he said...
Meet with him, meaning
Bob
Durst?
I'm sorry, yes. I wanted to meet Bob. And he said to me, well, he's kind of married. And I asked him what that meant. And he said that his wife had disappeared, but made a kind of a joke out of it, like she left him.
And ma'am,
so
what was it that attracted you at age 21 to this man more than twice your age who you didn't know was wealthy?
Okay, well, I mean, a lot of people in my family are a lot older, so I don't think age really mattered. I just knew that Nick would he would speak about Bob highly, and I knew he was good friends, and I knew Nick, so.
That is such an interesting lie. A lot of people in my family are a lot older. So she didn't say a lot of my family members married people much older than themselves. A lot of people in my family are much older. Yeah, my father's much older than I am. My mother's a lot older than I am. I have an older brother. I mean, it's such a great lie because it asks you to assume so many things, that she's talking about marriages when she doesn't say that. That's a really good example because we avoid lying because it's stressful. We lie by omissions in the way that we play with words. And of course, lawyers are experts at wordplay, and talked about that a lot recently, about why Alan Jackson, so I'm sorry to bring it up. I know for those people who are avoiding it, stressful trial, but why they use words extensively, phone them extensively, different words to exaggerate and really pull the wool over the jury's eyes.
From his personality, and what I've learned from everyone, that Bob was a lot of fun. And
At this point, though, you do not know that Bob is part of a billionaire.
swear, no.
Leading the witness.
Okay.
It's foundational to impeachment, Your Honor.
Hold- Just a moment. Let me look at this. Let me look. You may be seated. Just a moment. So sustain.
At this point, ma'am, did you know that Bob Durst was part of a billionaire real estate family?
I knew he was part of the family. I had no idea how much. I didn't.
Did you,
not.
ma'am, did you know that he was wealthy?
No, I didn't know what they owned. I just knew there was a real estate family, just as many other, I could rattle off 10 other clients that we had. I wouldn't know. I could name 10 more real estate development companies that we worked with at the time. And no, I don't know how big the family is or how much each individual person is worth. I was 21.
Ma'am, isn't it true that you were aware from Nick Chavez at the time that Bob Durst was
Calls for hearsay.
your biggest client, not for the truth of the matter
Right.
asserted?
Sustain. I'm sorry, not on those grounds. Hold on.
Ma'am,
Yes.
did you hear my question?
It's the leading part, not the hearsay part.
Yes. Wait, it's sustained on leading grounds?
Leading, yes, hearsay, no. So just to ask directly.
Ma'am,
Yes.
at the time,
Yes.
was Bob Durst one of the, if not the biggest, one of the biggest clients of that firm?
I would say there's 3 other companies that were just about the same, like that did a lot more advertising. So yeah, there was a couple of others.
So, ma'am, so you knew at the time then that Bob Durst was part of a family that was one of Nick Chavin's firm's biggest clients. Is that correct?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the
That-
relevance of this as it
Okay.
relates to the allegations.
Okay, overrule.
Well,
Overrule.
we have a sidebar, Your Honor, because I want to get it.
Okay, yeah, sidebar, fine, fine. Either on or off the record.
We can be off the record.
Okay. We'll just jam on it, folks.
So what they're doing is they're saying it's not relevant. This is something that was a criticism, but it's a criticism with a really misunderstanding of what the prosecution aims to do. So they're saying this isn't at all relevant to Susan Berman's murder, which is why we're all here, right? But what John Luanne is doing is absolutely gutting this witness on issues of credibility. And are already, would you believe anything? So once he guts her on things that just are less important, right? To the matter at hand, because where he's going. Spoiler alert, where the roadmap is going is to the issue of her being basically an accomplice in him fleeing, sending him a suitcase, packing it for him, hold on. Let me just clarify a little bit. She took a suitcase. She put $150,000 in it, in the bottom of it, an empty suitcase. And then she put some clothes on top of it, took it to one of those shipping places like, Boxes R Us or whatever the heck they're called, and had it shipped with her address on the return address on the label. And when it gets to that part, she's like, it was dark. I didn't know. I didn't know there was that much money. She still protests to this day, even though it was intercepted by the FBI. And I don't know. I haven't mistakenly ever packed $150,000 and shipped it off mistakenly. So so already she's lying as to her interest in Robert Durst. That there would be Kathy Durst is interestingly seems to be one of the only people and the way she's described, it's hard to know. She was becoming a doctor to make her own money. And I think that's really why the relationship went south, is because Bob Durst uses his money to control people. All his friends, you hear this journalist in the Jinx 2 saying all his friends were fiercely loyal. And that's what he demands of his friends. And I would assume his relationships, but he didn't seem to have, or didn't come out in this trial, and it certainly has not come out in the Jinx 2, after Kathy Durst, any real love interests or relationships that weren't about the women wanting his money, and did not go beyond skin deep. There was something the way that the Kathy Durst, the marriage, the way it's described by Bob Durst, as much as a psychopath can attach, not much. That's as far as he can go. Went farthest with Kathy Durst, and as soon as she got her own identity and own power, and was going to have her own kind of freedom in that became a real threat to Robert Durst, and the abuse escalated. And if you know anything about abuse, it can start with breaking of things, verbal abuse, to stalking, to physical abuse, and then of course at the end of the line, is ending a life. So you can see in this that Robert Durst did all those things, also tried to alienate her from her friends. He was awful, absolutely awful. And Kathy Durst's family is still trying to get justice. Now civilly is the only way they can, since Robert Durst has passed on from that absolute nightmare of a woman that he married. What a horrible woman that woman was. I mean, talk about two antisocial personalities meet. And she was smart enough to have a real estate agency run all by women in the 80s, and she would demand that she smell their armpits, like line them up and smell their armpits, because she had a thing about smells. I mean, that is a kind of nightmare boss that I've never heard of, a kind of torture from a boss that heard of all things. I worked shortly as a development, in development in New York. And you'd hear about new people work for Harvey Weinstein, how abusive he was. I'm trying to think of his name. I don't know. He got outed, but not really, a couple years ago for being abusive, but he was notorious. He produced the First Wives Club. The assistant had a hole in the wall from where he threw the phone. So crazy. Scott Rudin. That's who was trying to think of his name. Scott Rudin. He had the reputation when I was being the worst to work for. Worse than Harvey Weinstein, so if you believe that. Let me move forward here. It looked like they were going to get back to business.
Yes.
Did the two of you, you said you brought that up to Nick Chavez, did the two of you and Mr. Durst, end up dating back at that time?
No.
Did you end up even having a conversation with Mr. Durst where you, in essence, expressed your interest?
In a timeline?
Yeah, back then.
Back then, no.
And so you were at 21, were you single back then?
Yes.
And are you single today?
No.
And how many times have you been married between now and then?
3.
Okay, and so this is before any of the marriages and before you were involved with anybody at that time?
Yes.
Okay, so at that point in time, you and Mr. Durst don't end up dating. Do the two of you continue to have any contact, or is it just through the work that Nick Chavez was doing for Mr.
It was
Durst?
just the work.
How often would you see Bob Durst back then?
Not often. Maybe once a year, and I'm trying to think of the year. I had stopped working for a while at the agency, so it wasn't until I wrote to him when he was in Texas. So no, I didn't see him very often at all.
So did you have any personal conversations with Mr. Durst other than maybe hello or, goodbye, bringing him in to see?
No, not until later.
Okay, so that's a lot of years that go by, is that right?
Yes.
How was it that the two of you became reacquainted or reconnected?
I wrote to him
And when was this?
when he was in Galveston.
And would it be fair to say then that would be sometime between November 30th? I'm sorry, sometime between in 2002 or 2003?
Okay, yeah, it sounds exactly.
At that time, were you single or married?
I was single.
And had you already been married by then?
I was single till a couple of years after. So
No, so I didn't say this right.
it's-
So we left off in 1987 approximately, or the early 90s, and now it's 2002.
right,
So-
I was divorced, right.
So you were divorced. Did you already have children at this point?
Yes.
So you're divorced and you end up reconnecting with Mr. Durst. How did you end up reconnecting with him?
I decided to write him. I don't understand. I wrote to him and he responded. I said,
Well, I'm just trying to understand. You haven't seen him. You've really had no relationship with him other than saying hello and goodbye
right.
through Mr. Chavez. I'm just trying to figure out what was it that led you to recontact him?
Well, I was writing at the time, and I did write to him and ask him if he was interested in writing a book, because at one time you wanted to write a book. So I did write a few books, and I contacted him and asked him if he was interested in telling his story. And that's what the first letter is that I sent him.
So had you ever had a personal conversation of any length prior to sending him this letter?
No,
And when you sent him this letter, was this after you became aware that he had been charged with Morris Black's murder and was accused of killing and dismembering him?
it was after.
And you were also
So I knew now he's suspected, accused of killing 2 people. That's when I decided to get back in touch with him. I never had one conversation with him, but that piqued my interest. What an absolute morally bankrupt nutcase this woman is. Okay. Hey, Manny says, great shows, great stuff, Roberta. Thank you. Wicked Uma, thanks for the super sticker. Back to this woman. Absolutely. We're watching, if you're just tuning in, we're watching Susan Giordano's amazing direct examination of the Robert Durst trial in celebration of the finale of the Jinx Part 2 coming up on Max tonight. I, for one, can't wait for it. So sit back, relax. This might be a little bit of a longer episode.
Aware that he was a suspect in the disappearance of his wife, Kathy. Is that right?
Yes.
And so in contacting you to write a book, is it fair to say that you were looking to make some money?
In writing a book, yeah, I thought it would certainly be good for a career move. Yeah, so I guess, yes.
So you find Mr. Durst and you send him a letter. What happens after you send him a letter?
He wrote me back and just, asked me questions about what I've written, asked questions about Nick, I don't know exactly the letter, but he did write me back. I don't remember the whole content of the letter. It was a long time ago.
Were you a published author at that time?
I self-published.
Had you ever been paid as a reporter or as an author at that point?
Commission on the books that I've written, but like I said, I self-published the book.
Well, so that means, in essence, you basically wrote a book, paid to publish that book, and then you would have kept whatever sales you made for the book. Is that correct?
Yes, I didn't have to put money out, but it was the same type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And how much money had you made at that point, approximately?
Oh, I don't even know. I don't. It wasn't a whole bunch. It wasn't like I was buying cars. It was very little.
Right. Fair to say, ma'am, you were somebody who was interested in potentially becoming a paid author, but you really weren't one yet. Is that
Right.
fair?
Right.
And Bob Durst had a big story and a big name, and you saw opportunity. Is that right?
Yes.
So you end up contacting him. Did you ever travel to Galveston to visit him while he was in custody,
Yes.
waiting trial? How often did you visit him?
4 times, maybe in Galveston, maybe 4.
And did you do this at your own expense?
He paid for me. I paid, and then he paid.
Well,
So it wasn't. I don't know.
She's like, describe what it means at my own expense. He paid, and then I paid for maybe the air I breathed. I don't know what she's talking about. She magically got more money from Robert Durst than probably anyone else I've heard of, except his wife, who he quickly arranged a marriage right around the time that, if I got this right, that they opened up or reopened up the investigation into Kathy McCormick Durst's quote unquote disappearance. I'm not describing it as a disappearance. I firmly believe, after watching this whole trial, that he killed her. I don't have any doubt about that. So
Honestly, how many times? But
ma'am, if we use your best memory, isn't it correct that in fact Bob Durst primarily paid for you and sometimes your family members to fly down to see
he
him?
did. Yes, he did. He did pay for my sons. Yes,
So when you say you paid,
that's that time definitely. Yeah.
so when you say you paid, ma'am, what you mean is you might have, for one of the trips, paid something of one trip,
Right. Okay.
but primarily he was paying the bills, right?
For me to get there, yes.
And was he paying for your food and hotel while you were there?
I paid my own food. Probably paid the hotel. Yes. I mean, I paid for my food or my travel. Or...
Now, at this point in time, you had remarried, right?
Yes.
Did your
She just said he paid for the flight down there, and then she's like, I paid for my own food and my own travel. She just perjured herself right there. What are you saying? Your travel, my walk from the hotel room down the street? What do you I mean, are we getting into Bill Clinton areas here of what is the meaning of what is the meaning of travel? I don't know. It's so bad. And it only gets worse for her. This is as good as it gets in the whole cross-examination. And what's interesting to me about these cross-examinations where people are absolutely demolished, they always seem to think that they always have an air about them that they're doing well. They never seem defeated. Do you know what I'm saying? We can see that they're demolished, but they always seem to think that, there's this kind of, I guess it's a phony air of like, yes, I'm just up here testifying, answering truthfully like anyone else, as they're being exposed for absolutely being lying blatantly. So back to, those who are following the Karen Reed case, when I hear about these witnesses being so terrible and, everyone's lying. People do lie on the stand for all sorts of reasons. But if you're lying about something because maybe you're embarrassed about something, or if you're misremembering, that's something different. This is what it looks like to try to cover up for, or be really an accomplice in some ways to a murderer. And she's doing her best to make the relationship look as equal and as much of a normal friendship and not a sugar daddy type, huge age gap. I guess what you call it, money grubber, kind of money seeker relation, woman. She's trying everything she can because obviously she knows that's not going to look good for Robert Durst.
Did your husband go with you?
No.
How did you explain that one?
Objection, Your Honor.
Your Honor, can they state a grounds? He's just saying objection. There's no grounds.
Irrelevant. Totally irrelevant.
Okay.
Rude.
Okay, well, those are all overruled, but it may be 352 territory.
There you go, Your Honor. Thank you.
You may ask a different question.
Ma'am?
Yes.
So
See that right there you could see where they don't know. And there again, 352's thrown out again. Because they don't know the California evidence code, and the judge is being so kind to them. Because in other courts, you can hear, objection, leading, objection, this. But in California, generally, what you hear the prosecution doing is they throw out the evidence code when they object.
So you're going down there to see Mr. Durst. Did your husband, was he aware that you were traveling to see him?
Yes.
Did your husband know that you previously had a romantic interest in Mr. Durst?
Objection, Your Honor. 352.
Overruled. Overruled.
Yes.
And was your husband okay with you going down there given the previous romantic interest you had?
Yes.
At one point, you indicated that your sons actually flew down to Galveston as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Did Mr. Durst actually arrange special treats for you and your children sometimes when you would come down to Galveston?
There was one time that gave them baseball tickets to a baseball game.
He actually arranged with very expensive tickets for you and your sons to see Roger Clemens pitching. Is that right?
Yes, that was the baseball game.
And overall, how many times do you think you went down there?
I think I went there 4 times, I mean, maybe 3.
And did you talk to him? Were they interviews? What did you do when you were down there?
I was only down there for the visit. I stayed only a day or 2. I didn't vacation. I just went to visit him.
When you would visit, what would you talk about?
I honestly, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What mutual friend, like how advertising is? What career path am I taking? Or conversations, like not.
Yeah, normal, non-money seeking conversations, normal conversations between friends. And she's trying her best, trying to think about what normal friends. Bob Durst is, conversations you'd have with people who aren't maybe, say, antisocial, who maybe haven't ended the life of 2 people, those kind of conversations. People with, people who are non-murdering kind of people conversations, people, the kind of conversations those kind of people have. It's so ridiculous.
What?
Did the subject of his alleged murder and dismemberment of Morris Black ever come up?
No.
How about the disappearance of his missing wife?
No.
So you're planning on writing a book about him, but you didn't ask about 2 of the main.
No, because he did not agree at the time. And once he agreed that he was going to write the book, then I would have asked all questions. Right now, I was getting to really know him.
That's a really interesting thing about Robert Durst is that he was interested in all his press. He was hugely, like, all antisocial personalities are also narcissists, hugely interested, but also desperately wanted fame. And very much in the vein when he became famous from the Jinx, it was at the time where people like Kim Kardashian, we had more and more people becoming famous for notorious reasons, for things that would in other times be considered, meaning other decades be considered, past decades be considered distasteful, immoral, revolting. And he fit right in. The only thing he's ever achieved, the only reason you'd ever write a book on Robert Durst is to write a book about the crimes he's committed. He achieved nothing. He did nothing but sort of float around, going to Starbucks, state to state, lived in Texas for a while, had houses all over the country, just a total ne'er-do-well, lived off the family money, gave nothing to society. I mean, just an absolute zero of a human being. Was purposely offensive. Does anyone remember how he got arrested in a CVS stealing he got arrested for stealing he got caught stealing a sandwich in a fancy supermarket, then got arrested for peeing on a bunch of candy bars in a CVS. Got just a small fine. I mean, absolutely revolting. And what was talked about in this trial was how charming he was and how the jury would feel sorry for him. And he had super fans in the court TV chat saying, oh, not guilty. This guy's going to get off. Pretty much, I would say, I think these are people, I think, either you're going to root for the villain, right? There's a lot of people like rooting for the villain who are disordered people themselves, or just enjoy, or kind of like team criminal, like enjoy the idea of the criminal getting over on the man, right? The system, the big system, which is sort of the joke of the world. But because of the Jinx, he really did have, he charmed some people with his, I don't know how, with his weird burping and odd blinking. And I don't know how anyone found that charming, but people did. And that was the talk, that he's so, and he's so old. This is also, they said this was Cosby, that he was too old to try. Why were they even trying to get justice for Susan Berman and Kathy Durst's family in a kind of indirect way, even though we have double jeopardy, Morris Black, because everyone knows that was a joke, that verdict.
Well, when you say you're getting to really know him, it'd be fair to say that you were getting to know him in a way that was going to get you access to his money.
No.
So while you were down in Galveston, did you eventually get access to some of his money, including his credit cards?
No.
Do you recall telling Andrew Jockin and Mark Smerling during your March 10, 2014 interview that you handled all of Bob's credit cards while he was in Galveston jail?
No.
So that is not true.
No. He had to buy a gift once, and I didn't have the credit card information. He bought a gift for someone. That was it.
He would tell you to buy gifts for other people with his money, correct?
Once he asked.
When you were interviewed by Jockin and Smerling, did you in any way indicate that it was only one time?
I don't remember, but I only remember one time.
While Bob was in custody, did he regularly send you flowers?
Yes, and it used to say happy writing on it.
I thought that you didn't have any agreement to do any writing with
He
him.
didn't, but he knew I was still trying, whether it was with his book or I was still trying to write.
What other writing assignments did you have at that time?
I tried to take a class in screenwriting.
It's fair to say, ma'am, you didn't have any paid writing positions at that time. Is that correct?
Correct.
Any of your other platonic friends regularly send you flowers?
Honestly, I don't have that many friends, as I told you once before. I don't. I'm sorry. I have family.
At the time that this was going on, not only was Bob married, were you married, but you were aware that Bob was married as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you at all discuss anything relating at that time to pursuing any kind of relationship with each other in the future?
I'm so sorry.
I'll ask again, sure.
Yeah.
So you're going down and you're visiting, you're talking about different things. Did the two of you at that time have any discussions about pursuing a romantic relationship in the future?
Objection, Your Honor, to
No.
Your Honor, again, I'm going to ask that.
No.
No, but he doesn't
I
state
said it, you
the
just can't hear it.
Oh, then if he can speak, what was the objection? I didn't hear it.
It's overruled.
Oh, okay.
Move
If
on.
Mr.
The answer was
Chesnot,
no.
I'll speak louder.
thank you, I appreciate it.
Got it, buddy.
Ma'am, I couldn't hear your answer. Let me ask this again.
No. The answer was no. No,
All right.
I'm not telling you no. You can repeat it. I'm just the answer was no.
So you had originally wanted to date Mr. Durst approximately 12, 13, 15 years earlier. Is that correct? In 19
Yes. Okay. Yes, I just had to think because then I say the wrong thing. It's yes.
Right. So now you're down and visiting in Galveston. You're telling me you have no interest in any romantic relationship anymore.
No. Honestly, we're building a very strong friendship. I mean, we did.
Did you at all at that point in time, did you ever discuss getting a love nest together?
Yes. But the way I have a term, your term is just different than mine. I just wanted to take care of him.
So in 2002 or 2003, even back then, you were discussing with Mr. Durst the idea that he was going to buy a love nest.
Not back then. No.
Okay.
No, not 2000.
So listen to my question if you can, ma'am. So I'm not asking you about more current things. I'm saying back in 2002, 2003, when Mr. Durst was in custody,
Mhm.
did you have discussions back then?
No.
Ma'am, you've got to let me finish the question.
Oh, okay. Thought it was the same question. Sorry.
Did you have discussions back then about you and Mr. Durst getting a place to live together?
No.
Do you know when those conversations first came up?
4 or 5 years ago? Is it-
Well, so are you 4 or 5 years ago, did they come up before Mr. Durst was arrested in 2015?
Let me just think. I was sending him emails, yes. Before he was arrested, I had sent emails because I wanted him first to come live. It was a house next door to my house, and I wanted him to move. So through the emails, you can see that I kept sending him homes that were right next door to me because I have a very large family, and I thought living close and him being taken care of is important.
And by this time, husband number 3 was now ex-husband number 3, correct?
Just, no, not at the time.
When did he become ex-husband number 3?
Legally not ex-husband number 3.
Oh, okay. When
Okay,
did the two of you separate, or when did
we were just having issues.
I'm not asking about
And
the
he's
issues.
been very supportive, so I don't.
Man, I'm not asking about the issues. I just want to know, when was it, whether formal or informal, that you and husband number 3 ended up not having a regular marital relationship?
Objection relevance, Your Honor.
Right before, I guess I'm trying to think. Like my 5 years. I don't actually remember. 5 years ago, maybe.
Well, so
Wait, I want to instruct the witness to speak a little louder right into the microphone, pause, and you can take a moment before you answer, and then say it loudly.
Might have been about 5 years ago.
it was before Mr. Durst was arrested, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Your Honor, will the court take judicial notice that he was arrested on March 14, 2015? Or we can get maybe a stipulation.
Is that in the court file?
Yes, Your Honor. That is. I can ask counsel. Counsel, will you stipulate that that's the date of arrest?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, then I'll take judicial notice.
Ma'am, would you agree that as you sit up here today testifying, that you have a financial motivation to keep yourself in good graces with Bob Durst?
No, it's unconditional. Really is unconditional. It's not.
Okay, listen to my question though, ma'am. I'm not asking you what it is that's causing you.
Yeah, it's unconditional as long as he keeps sending me money. I'll unconditionally keep this relationship going, even when I'm married. Can you imagine how those conversations went with her husband? Yeah, he's just gonna fly me down to see him. Maybe I'm going to take the kids. He's going to fly us all down, a family trip to see the accused killer. I mean, what is going on here? Wild.
To testify, etc. I'm merely asking you, would you
Objection, Your Honor. He's testifying because I think we got a subpoena.
Wait, well,
What?
I don't understand the objection, but she did actually answer the question, Mr. Luanne.
Yeah.
She answered it and she gave an
Okay,
explanation.
ma'am,
Yes.
how much money has Bob Durst given you over the years?
Over the years?
Yeah.
300,000.
In February of 2015, right before his arrest, he sent you a check for $38,000, correct?
going to actually say, believe it or not, I don't remember. But
If you testified previously, or if you stated previously that you had been sent $38,000
then
in February of 2015, would that be accurate?
if I just right now don't really remember.
In March,
Okay, I mean, excuse me a second. I want to instruct the witness. She's actually continuing to speak and mumbling a little bit,
Oh.
and I want you to speak clearly, and then to speak clearly. All right? Thanks. You may ask your next question.
I apologize, Your Honor, I cannot hear the, I can't hear the mumbling. I just, when it stops.
But I
Yeah.
do. I
Yeah.
know she's speaking. She's on the witness stand under oath, and I want it to be on the record. The thing she says should be on the record, and that's. I know you didn't hear it.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you now.
Thank you, Your
Go
Honor.
ahead.
Ma'am, in March of 2015, did Bob Durst send you another check, this time for $300,000?
Yes.
So when you said he's giving you $300,000, ma'am, a moment ago I said, how much is he giving you in total? And you said $300,000. Ma'am, that's incorrect, right?
Okay. I forgot about the 38. It's
Well-
probably for my son. So yeah, I would.
Well, let's continue, ma'am. He sent you one check for $300,000. Trust me, I'm going to go through all of it. But he sent you one check in 2015 in March for $300,000.
Okay.
He's continued to send you money up until very recently. Is that correct?
I have not received a check.
Well,
I have not received a check. Nope.
So, ma'am, so there's been no payments. I'll get there. There have been no payments by Mr. Durst or his representatives in the last 2 years regarding.
Honestly, I don't know. I gave some of the bills that I had that were old bills that had to be paid, and I gave them to my attorney. That's what I did. I gave them to my attorney, and I still get them, and my bills are still a little late.
Right. So Robert Durst, I haven't been getting a check. Robert Durst has been paying my bills. So it's through an intermediary. Whenever she goes, she has that same lying voice every time you can catch it. No. Or she'll say honestly, or she'll swear. And those are all when she's getting ready to lie. I swear, I promise. No checks. I paid for my flight. I've been giving it to the lawyer that, just a reminder for those who just tuned in, we're watching the cross-examination of Susan Giordano in Robert Durst's trial in celebration of the finale of the Jinx Part 2 on Max, airing tonight. So Susan Giordano, just get a whopper, just a reminder that her lawyer from New York is being paid for by Mr. Durst. So all in an effort to really have her testify favorably for Robert Durst. Didn't work out as planned since she was taken as the state's witness before she could ever be a defense witness. Very clever. Let us continue this absolute. We know that basically we have she has her ticket bought and she's boarding the Titanic right now.
But
Ma'am, do you have an attorney who you just give bills to and he pays them?
he told me to hand over what I owe, and some of it was paid and some of it wasn't.
Well,
And I
ma'am,
didn't ask. Honestly, I didn't ask. I didn't see a check. I see that it's still a couple of months late, some of it, but I didn't ask, and I didn't see any money pass through my hands. Not a check, nothing since whatever you said, 2015.
so I want to go back, ma'am. I asked you originally, how much has he sent you? And I want to include your family in total. So I'm going to ask that again. I want you to take a moment. And I want you to try to think right now, in total, how much money has Bob Durst, either directly or indirectly, given to you or your family members in total?
Maybe there was 15,000 more in the bills that I had. I really don't know exactly. I mean, I don't.
At the time that Mr. Durst sent you that $300,000 check, He told you he was going to send that to you in advance of his arrest, correct?
I really don't remember. Honestly, I don't remember. I didn't know he was getting arrested either, to be honest with you. So until Andrew Jarecki called me, other than that, I didn't know. He said he was going to send me something.
Okay, so listen to my question, ma'am.
That's what he said.
I'm not asking you whether he knew he was going to be arrested. I'm asking you, prior to his arrest on March 14, 2015, you were aware that he was going to be sending you a large check, correct?
A check. I didn't know the amount. That's it. I didn't.
And ma'am, when you were interviewed on March 15, 2015, I'm going to get to this in a moment, but on that date, investigator Joe Becerra from the New York State Police showed up at your house with no notice to collect what are known as the Giordano boxes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to go into that in more detail, but I want to ask you, did you at any point mention to investigator Becerra on the 15th when he talked to you, hey, by the way, I'm supposed to be getting a check from Bob? You didn't tell him that, did you?
No. Did he ever ask me? I don't.
Well, you agree, on the 16th, he came back and re-interviewed you again the next day, correct?
Okay.
Would you agree that you did not mention to investigator Becerra the next day that Mr. Durst had sent you?
No, no, it wasn't. No, why?
No, it wasn't. The timing wasn't at all suspicious that I was sending him $150,000 cash in the bottom of a suitcase in these boxes. I believe these are the boxes they're talking about. At the time, right at the time he was fleeing, and in exchange he was sending me $300,000 check. The timing is just. He was going to send me a little something. I thought it might be another bouquet of flowers for all the writing I was doing.
Would I say something?
Well,
No.
you agree that investigator Becerra and Special Agent Eric Perry.
So she also trails off when it gets really, the questions get really uncomfortable for her. She also trails off. So no, I was just gonna do it. And John Lewin's very open about the fact that he wears 2 hearing aids. You know, you can't see them, but he does. So it's just funny. She's just trailing off.
The FBI, that they were asking you questions about your contacts with Mr. Durst, correct?
Correct.
Ma'am, are you telling us that it was a pure accident that you did not intentionally fail to mention this check that was coming? Is that your testimony?
Yes, I didn't do anything purposely. Is that what you mean? I didn't purposely not say, oh, by the way, I'm getting a check. I didn't.
Ma'am, do you recall, ma'am, being asked about the check 2 days later on March 18th, 2015 by Special Agent Eric Perry? You remember him from the FBI?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Do you recall him?
Oh, Dimitri Nobis is saying, John Lewin is a rock star. I would love to see him taking on the remaining Adelsons. I know that John Lewin does follow the Dan Markel case. So I've spoken with him about it. He's one of all the criminal lawyers that I've spoken to, someone who's very knowledgeable about true crime cases and just tends to know so much about so many cases, even if they're not a California case. So it's another reason why it's so much fun to talk to him. super knowledgeable.
Him asking you why you didn't tell Joe Becerra the other day about the strike that. Do you recall being asked during the March 18, 2015 interview with Special Agent Perry? Do you recall you mentioning at all anything again about that check?
Your Honor, objection. He's going to refresh her recollection. Should we show her what he's referring to?
Ma'am? To the best you remember, you didn't mention anything about.
No, I didn't
And would
mention anything about money.
would it be your testimony that if you didn't mention it, that was an accident, it was not intentional?
Objection, misstates her testimony.
She can explain herself.
She can explain herself. Let's have her explain herself. That's just basically John Lewin's technique. Have the witness explain the unexplainable, or the really uncomfortable, or the unflattering. Let's put it that way. Murder by Meister says, if John Lewin had moved to the dark side and been a defense lawyer, he'd be the most desired attorney alive. That's something he's very open talking about, saying, if I wanted to say things I didn't mean, I'd be a defense attorney, meaning and he said to me that he would never be a defense attorney, couldn't be a defense attorney. And just my impression by the long conversations I had with him has a real moral disgust with the way that some defense attorneys, how do I say this, can try to get over on juries, present theories that are patently ridiculous, try to get the worst people in the world off, and with the understanding that everyone deserves a vigorous defense. There is, and this is a kind of separation between lawyers who really work within the confines of the law and those that go up to the line, and I would even argue over the line. There seems to be a lot of lawyers, the acting criminally, and there just seems to be no safeguards. Seems like the only time they get in trouble or disbarred or anything is when it's some kind of financial practice with their clients. I mean, we're watching in real time with the Karen Reed trial, in my opinion, lawyers acting totally unethically. And it's very clear with what's been leaked out that these lawyers were putting on a defense for Karen Reed outside the courtroom before her trial through Turtle Boy, and putting out things that were patently false in the public sphere in an effort to, and Turtle Boy said it, to poison the jury pool. There is film clip of Turtle Boy with a bullhorn saying, I think he's talking to Morrissey, correct me if I'm remembering this wrong, but hey, we're poisoning the jury pool. So I just don't think Lewin would ever be a defense attorney in a million trillion years. That was the impression I got.
So,
If anybody would have asked me about, I didn't withhold any information purposely. Everyone asked me about the boxes. Those were the answers. That was it. No one ever asked me. It wasn't withholding information.
Ma'am, have you at times stated, when asked about large sums of money that you had from Mr. Durst, that you were merely, quote, holding money for him?
I wanted to put money down on a piece of property. That was it. I thought it would have been a good idea for him to move up to the Hudson Valley. And I would send him like I said, houses or property, and was my plan.
So what was your understanding, ma'am, of what that $300,000 was supposed to be used for?
Well, it was, Bob couldn't understand how expensive college loans were. And it was exactly 12.75 in interest. And at the time he said, why don't you pay the boys' school? Because it was almost $100,000, at least $100,000 in student loans. And then Tammie was moving to Louisiana and told me to pay LSU, whatever apartment he needed, pay up my bills, and start fresh.
So, ma'am,
Fresh start.
I want to understand this because it sounds like you're saying two different things. Was the money for you to put down for a house for Mr. Durst? Ma'am, let me finish. Or was it money that you were supposed to use for you and your family as you saw fit?
It was for both. It was a lot of money. So it was for different things.
And I assume then, since not all of it was supposed to be for you,
Right.
that you put it into an account that Mr. Durst would have had access to.
It wasn't withholding it. He didn't have access to the account, but if he wanted it, I had it. I wrote every single thing down where the money went, or always.
So you took this money and you put it into your personal account where you could spend it as you wished. Is that right?
Yes, it's trust.
Some of that money was supposed to be a loan. Is that correct?
Yes, I wanted to make it a loan.
It's been 6 years. How much of that $300,000 have you paid back?
Didn't ask me for anything back.
Well, ma'am, you just told me it was supposed to be a loan, and now you're saying that he didn't ask for anything back. Was it supposed to be a loan or was it supposed to be a gift?
He wanted it as a gift, and I told him that I think I should have the boys pay their share for responsibility. So,
Well, ma'am, let me ask you, you said that a moment ago, you said it was for you to start your life over. Do you
right,
recall that testimony?
right, and I said we had just different opinions. He really didn't worry about me giving anything back, and I just felt that if the boys had to use it to pay, they should still give something, just being responsible.
So let me repeat myself. How much of the money, that $300,000 that you used or your boys used, has been paid back to Mr. Durst?
I sent, I think, the 2 checks that week, and he was arrested and told me not to send anything anywhere.
Ma'am, those 2 checks were for a total of $2,000. Is that right?
Yes, it was 1,000, supposed to be 1,000 a week, and then, yeah.
So in 6 years, you made an effort within a week after receiving the check to pay back $2,000, which was actually not paid back. And then since then, zero. Is that correct?
Your Honor, mischaracterizes her testimony. She said that he told him.
But, Your Honor, I'm going to ask, I'm trying not to speak in objections, but Mr. Chesnoff, everyone has been a speaking objection. So,
Well, no, they're just sort of along the grounds.
well, they're,
But he's succinct with the grounds for the objection.
so ma'am, did you understand my question?
Mr. Chesnoff, maybe you could review, since you're getting paid a ridiculous sum of money to defend Robert Durst, maybe you could make yourself familiar with the California Evidence Code before you make your speaking objections. Oh, so ridiculous. And he's like, yeah, the judge he's always so polite, but also if you really listen to it, yeah, I just hear zero grounds for any of these objections. Basically, they're just objecting to also, I think, interrupt the flow because she's getting, it's so devastating here.
Question? Let me just ask it again to save time here. So in 6 years, there has been zero actually paid back. Is that right?
It was the 2 checks, and that was it.
Those
Right.
2 checks were never cashed, correct?
No, they were cashed.
Okay, so there have been And those are from your sons, is that right?
Yes.
So your sons paid back.
So you're just supposed to say objection, and I believe in California, I've heard if I hope I'm not getting this wrong, you're not supposed to influence the jury on the by explaining yourself and going on. It misrepresents her testimony, so it's nullifying her testimony unfairly, and that's why you would use the evidence code that I would think that the jury's not familiar with, instead of just going on these like huge long rants and influence the jury.
$1,000, $2,000 total, and you paid back nothing. Is that right?
Yes.
You were asked about this, is that correct, during your 2017 testimony, is that right?
Yes.
And at the time, you were asked what the total amount that you'd been given was. Do you recall that you said that it was $350,000?
Yes. Yes. After we just did the math now, so yes.
Well, my question to you would be, ma'am, if you remembered specifically there was a $300,000 check, are you telling this jury that when I first asked you that question, you only remembered one check that Bob Durst had ever given you, that $300,000?
Yes, I just, until you reminded me, I said I didn't remember. And if you said that's what it was, I honestly don't remember, but I'm sure you know, and then I'm agreeing with you.
And ma'am, when I asked you that question, you understood that the bills that you've been giving to your lawyer, some of which have been paid, you understand that that is being paid by Mr. Durst or his associates, correct?
I assumed.
Well,
okay, so I assumed.
Well, ma'am, okay, so why is it that you decided to give checks to your lawyer? What was your lawyer supposed to do with those checks that you were giving him?
What checks? Wait a minute.
I'm sorry, my mistake, excuse me. What was your lawyer supposed to do with the bills that you were giving to him?
He just told me not to stress, just to give him the things that were very, very late and had to be taken care of.
And was it your understanding, ma'am, that your lawyer...
They would be taken care of. See how she's avoiding saying paid? It was to relieve my stress. They told me not to stress. It would be taken care of. They would magically disappear into the air. Not that Durst was paying my bills. Whoa. Wow. Wow, how far out of the way she'll travel, not to lie. So for those tuning in late, the defense here is not from California. DeGuerin and Chip Lewis are from Texas. Sorry, they're not from California. They're from Texas. And David Chesnoff, David Chesnoff is based in Las Vegas. So they don't know the evidence code, and they picked up from the prosecution somehow along the way 352, and they would just try to use 352 every time they would object for any reason, any time. And this theme runs all through the trial. And it's amazing with the amount that they were getting paid, that they wouldn't even hire someone from California who knew the evidence code. It was bizarre. They looked like such amateurs out there.
Was paying those bills himself.
I never asked him where it came from, who wrote a check. I didn't see anything. I didn't ask.
Ma'am, so you're telling this jury that you have a lawyer that's being paid for by Mr. Durst. That lawyer is telling you, just give me these bills, and you're saying you had no idea that Mr. Durst is behind paying them.
I could assume anything, but I didn't see anything. Like I said, I didn't ask. It was.
So, ma'am, so when you say you could assume, is it fair?
Right. I just sent them and they magically disappeared. I didn't know they were getting paid. I thought that maybe they had some connections with all of, maybe Verizon. And they just magically disappeared once I mailed them in to my lawyer, who was also, by the way, paid for by Mr. Durst.
Fair to say that it was your belief, although you didn't see any proof, it was your belief that you were giving those bills to your lawyer to pass on to Mr. Durst and his representatives to be paid. Is that correct?
I guess. Okay. I don't.
Did you ever have any discussions with Mr. Durst while he was in jail about this exact issue?
Yes.
And did Mr. Durst tell you on September 30th, 2016, that he had told his lawyers to give you as much money as you wanted to do whatever you wanted? Do you recall that?
I don't remember. I really don't remember.
Mark,
Let's, why don't we take our break?
can I just play this one clip? Ron?
Okay, one clip and then
Thank
a
you.
break.
People's next in order, Mr. Milius.
The 207, People's 207,
All right.
I assume you're asking for SG 071.
This is September 20th, 2016, jail call.
Yeah, it is.
All right. I so I first see, I told him that I wanted you to have as much money to do whatever it is you wanted to do. Thank you. In terms of your life.
Oh.
I can ask her about it after the break, Your Honor.
Thank you. And 207A, we'll need that, which will be a written version of that. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our break until 3:20. Do not converse among yourselves with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. Chambers to impeachment preceding the relevant portion of the testimony. I told
Okay, so we've been going for 2 hours now. This might be a fun thing to return to, where she gets busted. So what she was doing for this money was basically being an accomplice to Robert Durst. They had plans to, when Robert Durst was acquitted, that never happened, thank heavens, to move into a love nest together. But in the meantime, when he was on the run, she sent him $150,000 in cash in the bottom of a suitcase with her address, and it was intercepted by the FBI. And what this is all a setup. So anything that she says about that suitcase, we've already seen her be impeached she said she was an impartial witness. It's totally impartial, and wasn't just up there to protect Robert Durst because she had benefited from his enormous wealth. So it gives you a really good idea of how detailed, why people who love trials or love true crime, is the stories, the characters, the making order out of chaos. Often the satisfying endings of seeing the closest thing we have in this country to justice being done. All those things are very interesting, and also seeing our legal system work in real time. But I will tell you that the best in my opinion, the thing that I really enjoy is going to trials. It's a little different watching it on your iPhone or watching it on TV. There's something about being in the courtroom. There's so many things that so much more you get. It's a lot of hard work and intense. You have to listen very closely. That there's no going back. You can't just rewind if you miss something. And it's very exciting when you're watching something happen in real time. And also, especially in the trial of the NXIVM trial and Ghislaine Maxwell, some of those witnesses were just so courageous. To see that in real time is really inspiring. So that's what I have for today. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode. Leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everyone.